Okay, now this is for Dr. Jean Murray's online speech class. This is my informative speech. My name is Corey Germany, and my audience is Dory Hufty, Diana O'Reilly, Will Sawyer, and Patrick Mahoney. So, Will. Just recording. Good afternoon, y'all. How are y'all doing today?
Good.
Good. Yeah. Good. I'm going to be talking to y'all a little bit about some history, actually. Today I'm giving a speech that's actually about the connection between the modern method acting, which are actors such as Heath Ledger, Bill Paxton, Sam Rockwell, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Marlon Brando, and its connection to European realistic movement in theater and in arts in general. So, beginning with a little history, in 1860, something started to change in Europe dramatically as the arts were concerned. We started to notice through the Industrial Revolution, a whole series of revolution happened, both politically, religiously, and socially. One of the main things that happened were all of a sudden drama started going from drama about what you could say nobility or kings and queens of Elizabethan drama to drama all of a sudden becoming about the small man or the middle guy. This happened because largely during Shakespearean times, if anything was low class or dealt with somebody who was commonplace, it was a comedy. So they were portrayed as blundering idiots or fools or tricky servants, and all of a sudden the age of revolution started to change that in people, and all of a sudden people were desiring to see something more. So we have a dramatist come along. He's a Swedish dramatist. His name is Henrik Ibsen. He's the first in a series of three, along with August Strindberg and Anton Chekhov, that basically are responsible for the realistic movement in Europe. Anton Chekhov actually comes along with The Cherry Orchard, and just as an example, where you have dramatists like Ibsen, who start giving complicated plots about a woman who doesn't want to leave her family, and then you have poetic fireworks of between social classes from August Strindberg and Miss Julie. You have a valet who's wooing a nobility woman, and because of their domination, the fight between the two, she ends up committing suicide. Drama had never been like that before. It was always very much about a king or very much about the struggles of the state, and all of a sudden it was dealing with details. So that's what they brought to the table. So flash forwarding a little bit. Now, this new type of theater ultimately called for new type of actors. Actors before were Shakespearean actors, Victorian actors, and very largely were played all through the voice. Acting was about listening to a play rather than actually watching a play. So with that, new actors answered. One of them happened to be Konstantin Stanislavski. Now, Stanislavski, along with another man named Vladimir Danchenko, started the Moscow Art Theater in 1898. They opened it in March, but I believe their big premiere show was actually in December. It was December 17th. It was the opening of The Seagull, a play by Anton Chekhov. Now, The Seagull itself, the play was a resounding success. No one had ever seen anything like it. It blew audiences out of the water, and the Mat became pretty much the resounding theater of the time. But problems persisted. Anton Chekhov, for one, hated Konstantin Stanislavski's portrayal of Trigorin in The Seagull. He couldn't stand it. He thought that Konstantin got it wrong. In fact, he hated it so much that he left the theater before opening night had closed and never heard the audience's reaction to the gunshot at the end. So he never heard the thunderous applause and realized how successful it was. On top of that, critics started to get onto the Mat. So for 8 years, the Mat has ended up touring, and at this time they are giving out realistic piece, and so they get a reputation towards naturalistic theater. The naturalistic theater at the time was considered an insult to a realistic actor because it was realism for the sake of it. They knew that they had discovered something different, so they were just in line with this idea, so they kept repeating it, and there was no substance. Well, this really started to get to Stanislavski. And you got to understand, at the time, as the theater is getting renowned, actors all across the world are hearing about the Mat. They're hearing about this new style. They're hearing about new plays coming out and how acting is turning into something that everyone can do. And it portrays a little man instead of a king or a queen. So his ideas started to spread. In this, in 1906, after a pretty successful tour, Stanislavski looks at his company of actors and says, "I'm not happy anymore." He feels that his acting is stale, he feels that his actors are inconsistent, and so he leaves the Mat. Well, now we're flash forwarding again. In 1930, the group theater in America, which had basically been thriving off of the old Stanislavski ideals, they start to experience the same problem. Now, the group theater is home to acting giants in America such as Lee Strasberg, who's basically responsible for his method, not the method, but another method actor. You also have Eugene O'Neill, was a founding member of the group member, who's America's first great dramatist. You have Tennessee Williams joined it later, and then also these other two actors named Stella Adler and Harold Clurman. Well, so they start experiencing exactly what Stanislavski was experiencing. They realize that they're inconsistent, that the theory that they've been working on isn't really following through. So they start to kind of come to a head with one another. Specifically, Stella comes to a head with Lee Strasberg. Lee Strasberg is the leader of the group, kind of de facto leader. Stella, who's also a teacher, and it says that this isn't working for me, Lee. I, for some reason, am stale, and I don't feel like this method is having it anymore, so I'm going to leave the group. She leaves, and her and her husband, Harold Clurman, go on like a sojourn to Europe. They wanted to get out of America. They were so desperate to get away that they take a trip. And on this trip in Paris in 1936, 30 years after Stanislavski had left the mat, they bump into Konstantin Stanislavski in Paris and learn from him for about 3 weeks. They come back, and what Stella Adler brings with her is pretty much the acting we see today in film at large. Her students are boasted to be personally Harvey Keitel. Her students personally boasted to be Marlon Brando, Lillian Hellman, Audrey Hepburn. All of these actresses and actors came back, and when Stella started talking about what Stanislavski had reworked, it swept the nation, and in that we have a connection between the European realistic movement and method acting of today. So thank you.